Today on Living History, we're speaking with Ilja Poepper.
A big wedding. You sometimes think where's all the money coming from, but a wedding is a face issue. And that was, of course, it were great, amazing days where sometimes the longest wedding I had in my hotel was for 1 week. And lunch, 400 to 500, and dinner, 400 to 500. On a weekend, 1,000 people. So you made millions. You made 1 to 2 million euro already on this kind of business.
Today, we're speaking with Ilja Poepper, who has over 20 years of experience in the China luxury hospitality industry. Hotels in China have changed dramatically in this time. Whereas in the early years after China's reopening, foreigners faced many restrictions even when trying to travel in China, today the hotel landscape is as refined and developed as anywhere. And that is in part thanks to the efforts of people like Ilja, who lent their experience to some of the most famous hotel brands wanting to do business in China. About this and many other memories, we're very happy to talk with him today. Ilja Poepper, welcome.
Hello, Chris. Hello, good afternoon.
So tell me, you grew up in China and you saw the first foreigners coming in. And if I were a foreign CEO, I wanted to start a joint venture here in the early 80s, what would my hotel experience have been like?
I believe if you would have been a CEO in the early 80s as a hotel CEO, I think you would not have maybe believed into the market. Because in those days, when we came to China, my dad wasn't a CEO of a hotel company. He was a CEO of a telecommunication and IT company. And he was already seen as a pioneer. Because I believe in the 80s, whoever went to China, people could not really see what is going to happen in China. Because I think we should not forget that the kind of opening up only started in 1979, what was brought to life by Mr. Deng Xiaoping, the former premier, and the changer of Kaifang, how we say in Chinese, of China. And he opened the window, but he let the mosquito net close so that the flies couldn't come in. The mosquitoes went through some of the investors, the foreigners, who were also seen a little bit as the bloodsuckers, but of course who also brought investments. And yes, the people who came here came into a country which was totally not developed. When we look today outside at the street, so many e-bikes as you see, before were bicycles. The bicycle roads often were more bright than the car roads. And when I'm looking down on my left side, I still see the old airport road going by here, what was a 2-line road going to the Beijing Terminal 1 airport in those days. So coming in such a country, I believe, firstly, you are shocked. But if you had a view and if you were a pioneer, of course, you could see what could be done in this country, what were the opportunities. And that is why I think many, many hotels finally then, or companies, international companies, came to China. But if you go back in the time in the 80s, there was the White Swan Hotel existing in Guangzhou, where was the German general manager in those days. In Beijing, you had the Django Hotel, what belongs also until today to BTG, Beijing Tourism Group. And on the left side, when now looking down here again, you had the Holiday Inn, what was opened in 1984. So a very early hotel, what was the first real international hotel in those days with over 1,200 rooms and with 16 food and beverage outlets. And this Holiday Inn was also the first hotel group and the first international hotel here in Beijing, which one then built residentials, service residentials for the expats like my dad. Because the expats before, we had to live in hotels. My father moved from the Django Hotel, then into the Sheraton Great Wall, what was one of the first 5-star international hotels here in Beijing. You had the Hilton just opening up in Shanghai, the Hilton Jing'an, what is sadly not anymore managed by Hilton. And then here they built the first residential, service residentials. And in those days, you needed a relationship to get an apartment. You needed relationship to get a hotel room in such an international hotel, who had an international breakfast, who had an international all-day dining menu for the card. And it was a different world. It was something totally different when we compare today, because today, if it is about consume, you name it, we have it. You have everything in China in our days. And I think it's already too much what we have in China. But it's amazing the change from 80s, what is now 40 years, until today, after the opening up of China, what this country have done. And if it is in the infrastructure, if it is in the real estate, if it is in the opening up. And that's why I'm again here. I left China for a short while, but I came back because I see, and I still see, things are happening here.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because you came here as a teenager at a time when foreigners were not allowed to just live anywhere. There were very limited amount of hotels. There were the diplomatic residences. You needed special permission to travel to other cities. What was it like for you?
For us, when I came here the first time, I then later went to my dad came here in 83, the first time, and he then opened up the company here where he was the chief representative for, and he also started to found it with a group of people, the German Kaufmannschaft, what is in our days the German Chamber. And when I came here the first time, I was still in boarding school in Germany, and because the West German school in those days didn't have my class. So finally, I had the opportunity to come because they had the grade where I could join in, and we were 4 students in the class, and that's always a good joke. When I met my now wife and I told her, she asked me, so you were good at school? And I said, I was okay. I was the 3rd best in class. And then I told her, but we were only 4 and 2 of them were twins. Yeah, but it was different. We had a different currency. We paid with FEC, foreign exchange currency, Wakwaitia also called, where I had a lot of, I have to say, adventurers with, because I helped to change the money for all the expat ladies on the black market, and I made my own money in my pocket, what was not always safe, but it was a good pocket money for me. As you said, we could only stay in the residences for the foreigners and not for the diplomats, because we were expats kids. My father was an expat here. We're building up this company. So we were not allowed to use a diplomatic residence. So we had to stay in the expat residence, which were tremendous expensive. Our 180 square meter apartment in those days cost $11,000 net. And I remember my father had 2, because he had a colleague as well working for him from the States. And so it was alone only for the apartments $22,000. What had to be paid in US currency and 1 year deposit. So that was what was all different, as I just said. So you had to fight and you had to be lucky to get such an apartment with Guanxi, with the relation. As you also said, traveling in China, in those days we had always a joke we called CAAC, China Airways always canceled, because the flights were very often canceled because there was maybe not enough demand, or maybe there were some special air traffic control, what we also still have in our days, but in those days I believe even more. And it was all not so convenient as it is now. And the train in those days, I remember when I went to Guangzhou the first time as a 17, 18-year-old with my friends from school and later from university, it took us 36 hours in the sleeping wagon. So it was an experience. And then we took a ferry from Guangzhou to Haikou. And then we took a bus for which took another 15 to 18 hours. And then we took a bus for 12 hours to Sanya. And then we were in Sanya. So it was not easy getting around. It was not so developed. But that was the adventure. I mean, as a teenager, what else do you want? That is, you see the country opening up. You saw the country growing so fast. You saw the people changing. The people, when I came the first time, all in green, gray, and blue. Yeah, and all the similar hairstyle. And ladies totally no makeup, all conservative and short hairs. And then everything changed. And everything went forward. And then the music came, maybe you remember the famous lady singer from Taiwan, who sang the beautiful pop songs, and it was very modern. You could hear in every taxi. And then Cui Jian, the old rock star from China, Cui Jian, who even in the later days and after 89 came to Berlin as well and to Europe and had his concerts. So it was the first Chinese rock star, and that is how China opened up. I remember we had Richard Kleiderman coming to China. We had Udo Jürgens coming to China. And when I came back in 98 and worked here already, we had the Musikantenstadel next to the Forbidden City. So stories experiences what I think I would not have had in this kind of way in Germany or in Europe or anywhere else in the world, because that was unique happening here.
Ilja, that's fascinating. And you just mentioned teenager and adventure. How was dating in China in those days as a foreigner?
In those days, we dated only foreigners, because you could not date a Chinese, because you should never forget, even in our days, when you go into any compound, you still have the securities at the door. And in those days, we had a security at every, not a house door, but at each building door. And if you brought a Chinese to your home, even when I brought my clarinet teacher, when I brought my singing teacher, I had private singing lesson, I played clarinet. When they came to my home, they had to register. So in those days, of course, we had one of the first discos here at the Lido, Holiday Inn Lido in those days, Juliana's, and some beautiful Chinese girls also sneaked in. But bringing them home was not possible, because you would have to show the marriage certificate and that you have a real relationship. Otherwise, I would have had a problem, better my dad in those days as a teenager, and of course the girl as well. So in those days, we dated girls from the expat community and from the diplomatic community. So my first experience was not having a Chinese girlfriend here in this country. I don't want to say not too much, but I had for sure a kind of taste of everything from the Middle East to the West and to the United States.
But in general, when you were walking around also, how would Chinese people approach you? Were they interested in you? Were you being ignored? What was it like?
I would say like this. In some places you were ignored, for sure. And if it was ignored, or if it was as well a kind of respect, was it a kind of being scared because to make contact? Because in those days it was not normal, or it was not allowed just to make contact to foreigners in those days. Or as well, and then you had this relationships, as I said, like with my clarinet teacher, who was really my teacher and a friend, who teach me to drive a motorbike. Who teach me not only playing clarinet, he also teach me how to drive a motorbike. So, and who teach me first time how to drink baijiu, and the Chinese liquor. So it was again that was a friendship, And in the end, when I was a bit more mature, when I was 17, 18, I made business with him, because he was as well changing money. So I did all the money changing with him, and he was selling a lot of electronic goods like VHS in those days, and video recorders, and and I helped him a bit to do the business. So I made again extra money in my pocket. So in a way, as you know, what I always liked in China, you always could also, because Chinese people like to do business. And I like to do sometimes a bit of business. So I had a lot of fun as well in this stage. But my first girlfriend was not a Chinese. But in our days, my wife is here from Beijing. I met her in 1998. We are happily married, and we have a daughter who is right now in boarding school in South Germany at the beautiful Lake Constance on the lake.
How did you guys meet?
Well, we met in a bar, but not in a typical expat bar. It was a bar in the west of Beijing at Xijimen, because her home isn't too far from there. She is born in the Beijing University, Beida, and born there, grown up there, studied there. Her parents came there in the 1956 from the Harbin University, and then were professors of mathematics and physics in the university. And we looked at each other. She just came back from Switzerland from her studies, and it was, I don't want to say love at the first sight, but I think we had a good communication, a good understanding, because she spoke very good English. She spoke quite fluent French, and I spoke my Chinese. So she had this respect as well with my history, with her history. It clicked and it fit. And the good thing was that she understood in 98, as I was already in the hospitality, she understood what kind of job is I'm doing, because she went to Switzerland to go to a Swiss hotel management school where she studied something similar, after graduating from literature from the Beijing University. And so she could understand in what kind of job I am in, because It's not easy to be married to a person who is working in hospitality, maybe, because our working times, our working days are totally different than two people who have just a very steady job in a normal company.
And I heard from some chefs that this was also in the F&B industry in particular a very challenging time to get quality ingredients. There was no cold chain. Food safety was an issue. When did that change? How did that develop?
I think China, especially when we go into international hotels, we have very strict food hygiene control. You should know in every hotel in China, we have a food hygiene doctor. So a lady or a gentleman who is doing the food hygiene controls, who is taking samples every day of the food. And if it is on the buffet, if it is in the a la carte restaurants, and we are doing food hygiene checks. So yes, you are right. You had to be careful. But already in the 80s, before I was in the hospitality, but especially already in 98, you had a lot of suppliers as well who were already professionalized in giving this kind of food supply, that you did not had anymore a big problem with food hygiene. But it can happen anywhere. This can happen in the US, it can happen in Europe, that you have a food poisoning, that you have this kind of problem. This can happen anywhere, and you should always be careful. Especially, I can just recommend to anybody eating raw fish from the buffet. I would really think about it twice, and especially when it's summer and the buffet is on in open air, then maybe better have something what is well cooked.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Sadly, I've learned that lesson. And you know, these days, there are wonderful luxury hotels with amazing service, and there's Michelin stars, restaurants everywhere here. When did all that start? Because from what I hear, Western cuisine, Western hotel standards in the 1980s and 90s were far and few in between.
That's totally right. I think this, in the 90s, 80s, as I said, because you also didn't have many hotels in China, you could really choose as an international hotel. You didn't have many hotel groups in those days already being confident to be here. I mean, the real luxury groups came actually much later. Kempinski, for example, who I'm working for, came to China and opened the first hotel in 1992 here in Beijing. And that is, I think, as well, one of the turning points where it slowly really started, where people had more confidence in the market. And we had a joint venture here with our first hotel, what was invested by BTG, Beijing Tourism Group, by Kempinski, by Lufthansa, and by a Korean and Singaporean partner. And the Kempinski in those days called Kempinski Lufthansa Center on the Liangma River, today called the Kempinski Yansha. And that was, of course, one of the hotels to be. But we should not forget also in the 80s, be honest, we had some great Western restaurants here in Beijing and also in Shanghai, but of course not the rest of China. Maybe in Guangzhou a bit, but Beijing, Shanghai had already something. And I have to say, sometimes in those days, we didn't have Michelin-starred restaurants, but we also didn't need it. Because in those days, in the Django Hotel, we had the Justines. It was one of the best high-end French restaurants. We had the Maxims at the Tianmen in Beijing, close to the Forbidden City and Tianmen. We had the Maxims restaurant. It was a superb restaurant as well. We had the all-day dinings. I remember we had the Brasserie in the Shangri-La in the west, where you had the Sunday brunch, where you had black caviar, so the real caviar in this kind of bowls, and you could take it by big spoons. So we had actually a lot of luxury already in the 80s and 90s, but not so much. It was, but I have to say, in those days, sometimes much better quality than maybe even in our days. It wasn't cheap, but it was value for money. And I have to say, now we have everything, as I said already before, you name it, we have it. If it is Western food, Indian food, Japanese, Korean, and so on and so on. But the quality, I have to say, in the old days, looking into quality, into luxury quality, was even better. Yeah, and because China, in a other way, also was really opening up. So it was sometimes even easier to get a US beefsteak into China, but in our days it's more difficult. So yes, we had as said, a great time. But in 92, Kempinski started, and what was their turning point is they had a Paulaner. Yeah, the Kempinski Hotel with the Paulaner, what is still existing today, with home-brewed Paulaner beer. So we had a joint venture with Paulaner, Kempinski and Paulaner here in Beijing, the first one, and it was rocking. In those days, 80-90% of the customers were foreigners, expats. In our days, 90-95% of our customers are Chinese. So also a bit of change, as you can see from the consumer market. But that is, of course, what we wanted. And that is where hotel groups looked at in 1992, or anybody. You were not looking at to make money with the consumer markets. We had this great hotel for the expats before, that we had our Western food. So that we could have a bit of our Western life here in China. But of course, everybody came here for what? To make money on the great consumer market, what is happening here in China. And that's, I think, in 92, the turning point was there, where then more and more hotel groups came in. And then a real boom started, only the real boom where more and more hotel groups came in, and the hotels were pumping up like flowers, like in spring, like crocus in Germany. You could see everybody coming in before the Olympics, because it was a big event. We had the Asian Games before. I remember in 1990, before I left. And then the big event, of course, was 2008 with the Summer Olympics here in Beijing. And that is where a lot of Chinese hotel opened. That is where the first time I think the hotel industry really experienced one of the highest turnover of people, because so many new hotels opened. So there was not the loyalty anymore. And that is also when, of course, the first time the real competition started in a way. Why? Because you had so much supply on hotel rooms, and sometimes the demand wasn't there especially after the Olympics for the first couple of years, because there were too many hotels. And then another thing happened. Then the same thing happened later than in Shanghai, in the World Expo. I think that was 2010, was the World Expo in Shanghai. And the same thing happened in Shanghai, like in Beijing. Hotels popping up everywhere. And you had Grand Hyatts, you have the Hyatt groups, you have the Hilton, of course, already existing, developing faster, Marriott group. So you had groups, more and more American groups coming in. You had more and more European groups like Accor coming in. And we were already established with Kempinski since 92. And of course, IHG, what is IHG in our hotels, was one of the first players in China, and Starwood with the Sheraton Hotel. Yeah. So, and now the hotel world, it looks so different. And in our days, we have also very big competition, not only with international groups, we have also more and more competition with local Chinese groups, because they're developing the fame fast. And sometimes they have great concepts, they have great strategies, because they really sometimes better even understand the local market.
And you've actually worked for local groups. You've worked for Dalian Wanda, of course, which has opened so many luxury hotels. How's working for a Chinese company different than for a Western company?
No, when I was approached by Wanda to work for them in the beginning, I was a bit scared to work for them, because Wanda was very famous to hire and fire. Yeah, and everybody knew if you survive 3 months with them, then or 6 months, you're already good. Everything I try to discuss, I will normally discuss with my wife and with my family for my steps in the career. And so far, it always worked out well. And finally, I decided to go to Wanda. I also asked my father-in-law, and we did a bit of background study. I liked the history of the chairman of the group, Mr. Wang Jianling. I liked the stories they told me, what they want to do, that they want to build up a Chinese hotel group, so that we had to found hotel brands. I founded 4 hotel brands with Wanda Group together, but we also already worked with other international groups, because we were a heavy asset. So I was in charge. I was working with Hyatt. I was working with Starwood. I was working with IHG. I was working with Hilton and with Accor. We had Grand Hyatts, Park Hyatts, we had Intercontinentals, Crown Plazas, Sofitels, Conrads. So we had everything at once through from luxury to economy with our international partners. And I did the asset management. So that's the deputy general managers who were sit into the hotel from us, were reporting to me. And we built more and more hotels. So we were giving some hotels to our partners, because you cannot only have your own brand hotels, because we were not only building Wanda plazas with one hotel, we were also building Wanda cities. We were building Wanda destinations. One example is we built Wanda in Chiang where we had one of the first man-made ski resorts in China, where we had 12 hotels, for example. So when I opened the resort, I opened 12 hotels. And that's sometimes when you needed to work with different brands. And I was founding Wanda Realm, Wanda Vista, Wanda Rain, and Wanda Jinghua with a team, with the president of the company. And we grew very fast. We opened 75 hotels in 6 years. But as I just said, sometimes you open in one go 6 or 12 hotels. So I remember the heaviest year, one year was we opened 23 or 25 hotels. So that was crazy. So that's why also after 6 years, I had enough with Wanda. But it was an experience to work for a Chinese company totally different than working with an international group. It was tough, very hard work. You didn't have a private life, I'm very honest, but you were very good paid. That wasn't but the most important thing. I think the important thing was to be a pioneer in the Chinese hotel industry, to found a hotel brand, which is until today successful. Wanda hotels until today have light asset hotels, over 150 to 180 hotels very soon. So it's a successful Chinese brand, what I founded with my team and with my colleagues and with my boss. And I think that's what I'm very proud of. And sadly, chairman needed to sell all his properties to other companies, and sadly also he had to sell the properties in Australia, in London, in Beverly Hills, in Paris, in Madrid. Our hotels would have been popping up very soon abroad as well, all over the world. Sadly, this didn't happen anymore. Otherwise, I would be maybe now based in Los Angeles or London and being the president of Wanda Hotels International. But, well, the dream was over, and then it was also time to leave the company with a happy and a sad heart. Yeah, and then I had a beautiful sabbatical, and I was in the Mergui Islands sailing with Burma Boating, what was run by my small brother in those days. And I saw the Mergui Islands, beautiful in Myanmar, before the civil war started and before COVID. I was in Thailand. We thought maybe one day we're going to retire in Thailand. But then we found out it's not the right thing to be for your whole life on an island like Koh Samui. And we were in the mountains and we were in the States. And finally we went back to my base, what is on beautiful Bodensee, Lake Constance in Überlingen, where is always my base when I'm going back to Germany to relax there, or I'm going to Berlin to see my mom and brothers.
I want to talk about something else still. That is, luxury hotels are not just about the products they offer. They're very much about the service.
Yes.
What was service like in the early days, and how did you guys teach people the art of service?
You know, the art of service, you're totally right. A hardware is what the owner gives us. They are building the hotels. Us, as a management group, the job is to do the trainings. So training, of course, is one of the most important things. That's why also we say when we are opening a hotel, we need a trial run time. It's not, okay, I give you the key on 1st of March and then you just start to run the hotel. That doesn't work like this. We need at least normally 2-3 months trial run. So that means the chefs have to heat up the woks, the cocks, the pots, the woks, and everything like this. They have to be cooked a couple of times inside. We have to do that. The teams know how to work together. We have to do role plays. We have to do trial runs for banquets, like for weddings, for conference, for set dinners, for buffets. So that this works. In this moment, of course, our service team will be the people who then are serving maybe the invited guests or our own staff, our own employees. We will have our own employees, our families maybe staying in the hotels to being a guest, but then always having a question form, what is right and what is wrong. And so that is the perfect opening of a hotel, how it should be. And that is where we are always working to as a brand standard as well from Kempinski to really then fulfill a luxury service, because that is how it should work out in our days. So you have to train, and you have to repeat and repeat and repeat. And mistakes are happening. And to be luxury, it's training is one of the most important things. To pay fair, I think is an important thing. And training is what? Training, a lot of people, maybe they are willing to have a bit of less salary, but they want to have training. Because the people want to have education, the people want to be educated, especially the young people in our days. We have to give them a hope, and we have to give them a view what can happen with you in the future. So a career plan is also very important, to have a career plan in place for the young people, to tell them, well, you know, in 5 years, you could be here. And in 10 years, maybe then you are, for example, a general manager, or faster or slower, or maybe never. That also depends on how is the person reacting to it, how does he fit into it, and how does he like it. Because sadly, in our hospitality industry, not only in China, worldwide, you have one of the highest turnover. Yeah, sometimes what is turnover can be good, but too high, of course, isn't good, because then you don't have stability, and then you don't have the consistency.
CNN and YouTube used to be around on hotel TVs. And when did all that change? Because now if in many hotels, you turn on in China, you turn on the TV, there is no more CNN or BBC.
Yeah, there is no more, less and less CNN and BBC. I think one of the reasons is there are less expats. Firstly, in China, compared before COVID, there are less expats. But also, I think, as I just mentioned, people, I don't need to have the TV on, I do not need the TV anymore, because I have it all on my device. I have it on my mobile phone, I have it on my iPad, I have it on my whatever. And that's where I also can download or anytime watch my channels, what I like to watch. And that is also what we found out, that the usage of those TVs is getting less and less. So if it is HBO, if it is Cinemax, if it is a Star Movie, you will see less and less hotels who are having this. And we have to be honest, to get this for your hotel, it's a hell high price. It's so expensive what a hotel has to pay for it. And then especially when you have also less, when your mix of international guests is 5 to 3 or 2%, sometimes 1%, you do not really need this anymore.
Understood. In the early days, building the first luxury hotels, working in the first luxury hotels, what were the challenges that you guys were facing? What was most difficult for you?
I think what was the most difficult thing is always to get the people, to get in those days, in the very early days, also to get the workers. To come who were able to build the hotels and experienced people. Experience, because there was no experience for luxury hotels before in China. As I said, when I came to China, there were 3 or 2 international hotels in Beijing. And nowadays we have hundreds. And that is what changed. And so you didn't have the people who had the experience. And that was, I think, one of the biggest challenge. Sometimes it was maybe also difficult to get some of the hardware. For example, if it's a marble, if it was the marble for the lobby, if it was glassware for the restaurants, it was a fork and knife, because everything had to be imported in those days. In our days, of course, we still have a lot of imported things. If you go into luxury, especially if you want to have Christopher glass, if you want to have Naomi China ware and so on, that is still all imported. But in our days, China has so much to offer again that you do not need to import, and that is also again where it is much easier than before. And in our days, I think you know as well, Chinese workers, construction workers, are some of the best in the world. The people from Guangzhou, they are working in Middle East. or even in other countries, the people from Anhui, from Sichuan, they're working in Africa. And for us in our days, sometimes projects are slower, not because we don't find experienced people, because these people are going out of China to build houses. So because they are so good and so experienced.
You told me two things that I want to expand on with you a bit. First, you said you as foreigners were not allowed to just live anywhere in China in the early days. But the other thing also that you said is now Chinese customers make up 99% of your customer base often. When did it start that Chinese people were no longer prohibited from going into international hotels? When could they come? And when did you actually see more Chinese customers be customers of high-end luxury hotels?
I think China opened up because during this time I left China. But when I left China in 92 and I came back in 98. And it must have happened between 92 and 98, because when I came back in 98, anybody could come already to international hotels. The market was open. And I remember that it was 2 years, or was it already not anymore, when I came back, the FEC was also gone, the foreign exchange currency. So, and that is, I think, when everything happened, that you didn't need a special badge to enter a hotel anymore. So, and Chinese customers staying in hotels went up slowly and slowly. It came first to customers who first stayed in hotels were corporate people, working for organizations, working for governments, working for international companies, for any kind of global 500 companies which were based in China. And of course, they had Chinese employees, and they had then, when they went on a business trip, they were staying in our hotels. The real leisure customer, I would say that people really travel and leisure and do staycations and those kind of things. I think that started more after 2003, 2004. You could see a trend coming up. And that's where you saw as well more and more customers coming to the restaurants. And that's where you saw more and more customers also staying in hotels and doing holidays. Just look at Sanya. Sanya is, I think, a very good example. What was never really an island only for foreigners. It was an island as well. The Chinese Hawaii built so many great international hotels there in Sanya, which were for the Chinese, because the Chinese started to travel. And that is where I think that started all more again in 2003, 2004, 2005. That's where you then also, as I said, in 2008, you saw the hotel booms really starting. And that's then also when it started, where all the hotels went more and more into secondary cities. I mean, I opened, for example, one hotel in 2001 in Hefei in Anhui. Yeah, and in those days, our customers, I had 10% foreigners, maybe 90% were Chinese, and these were corporate people from state-owned enterprises, from Global 500, and from the governments, and of course a lot of MICE business. That's why you see very often MICE means meetings, incentive, exhibitions, and events. That's MICE. That's where you really also saw the grow in China. That's why in China the hotels which we build are also big. What in our days is actually a big problem, yeah, because we have ballrooms from 800 to 1500 square meters, because you had big weddings. A wedding easily could be 800 people to 1,000 people. You had the big meetings, but that all came down already with weddings in 2018 to 19 went less and less. And since COVID, of course, this big conventions and conferences are getting less and less.
You told me earlier that many international hotel chains didn't believe in China in the beginning. They thought, oh, we're never going to do business there. Nobody has money, probably, right? But then they changed their mind and they started opening in smaller cities and smaller markets as well. We talked about Ningxia and Kempinski there before. When did that change? And how did the local governments, who also were not used to dealing with international hotels, react? Was it easier or more difficult than cities where you're normal, like Shanghai, Beijing?
You know, here I like to give an example, maybe also from Wanda, when I was in Wanda, because we really went into markets where we were pioneers.
Yes.
For example, in Ningde, where the president of China in our days was the first time the party secretary. And in Ningde, we opened a Wanda Realm Hotel. And everybody, when I talk to them, I'm going to Ningde today, they ask me, where is Ningde? Most of the Chinese friends didn't know where's Ningde. That is in Fujian province, 2.5 hours drive from Fuzhou. Yeah, and you know, that's, for example, an example where we were daring to go. We went to Zhangzhou, again, Fujian province, what is not too far from the famous Tulou, you know, those round houses where they also had this famous movie Mulan. We went into places where nobody would have gone. And we went into those places as well with international groups. As I said before, we work with international groups, and sometimes we put a Sheraton there, sometimes we put a Pullman there, sometimes we put a Hilton there. And why were we doing this? Because we were building Wanda plazas. And a Wanda plaza means it was a shopping mall with always a cinema, for sure, because Wanda was also the biggest cinema owner in the world. They owned AMC, they owned Hooters, and so on. And we had cinemas. We had always a Starbucks. We had McDonald's. We had H&M. We had Zara. We had all the brands in the Wanda mall. We had an office space of 2 towers. We had at least 8 or 12 apartment blocks. And then, of course, it was always a wish of the city. Well, we also would like to have a nice luxury 5-star hotel. Because like this, we are ready to welcome high-end customers. We are ready to welcome high-end delegations, international as well as Chinese delegations, and we have a face. And that's, I think, where it's really started, that people also were willing to move into this 2nd, 3rd, 4th-tier cities. Because you would have never found before Hyatt hotels or luxury hotels in a 3rd-tier city. In our days, you see it more and more. And that's why those hotel groups also changed to have more other hotel names, not only Grand Hyatt or not only the Hilton or the Conrad. They also had Doubletree Hilton. They had also Holiday Inn, not only Intercontinental. And we had different Wanda layers. And that is what changed. I mean, don't forget, Ritz-Carlton belongs to Marriott. Ritz-Carlton is a top brand, but it belongs to Marriott. It's not an independent brand like we are as Kempinski. We are an independent brand since over 127 years. Since 1879, we are the oldest luxury hotel group from Europe, from Germany. Yeah, our first restaurant was at Potsdamer Platz, Haus Vaterland in Berlin. And that's where we are different to compare to other groups. And that's where you could see with the investment, with the fast investment of real estate companies, if it is Wanda, if it was Vanke, if it was Evergreen, because many of them also were working very close together and are working close together with hotel groups, and then having a complex of apartments, office space, shopping, and of course a Start Hotel. And I think that was the time when it started as well here again in 2010, 2008. It started slowly to go into those different cities where you maybe have never heard about. And now, as I said, actually nearly everywhere in China, we always said so long there are more than 3 to 4 million people in this town, then we are ready to build a Wanda hotel, 5-star or 4-star. And that's how the other people also looking at. You look at the population, it's the surrounding, and you look at the GDP, and then you do the decision if it's the right place to invest there. In those days we invested, or in our days, of course, as a light asset manager, if we can manage it, because you cannot just sign a contract and say, well, we help you to manage it. We have to take responsibility, because for us, the biggest success for an owner to work for, to make him successful and that he have his return of investment into the real estate, what he's building there.
You've really worked in hotels all over China. Are there memorable moments that you can't believe you witnessed?
Too many honorable moments. You know that. Let's go back to 2000. After I left Beijing, I went to Anhui Hefei, and I built the first 5-star international hotel in Anhui Hefei. But it wasn't in downtown. It was a bit on the countryside in the development zone, but it's now CBD. In those days, it was a countryside, a couple of factories, and it was to get customers there was so difficult because it took you 20 minutes to 25 minutes from downtown to get there, and there were no lights at night on the streets. It was all dark, and I have never seen so many accidents in my life. But then what was amazing thing what I saw, we had the agricultural China meeting. So we had, after the hotel opened just for 6 months, and we had all the agricultural ministers coming. And we had also vice ministers coming and premier minister of China. And the area wasn't really finished. The hotel was ready, but the surrounding wasn't finished. And I saw the first time in my life how a park was built. A park of maybe 400,000 square meter to 300,000 square meter within 3 days. So, and that is something what I have never seen before in my life. So people like ants came, and 24 hours they worked, and in 3 days a park was finished. So that I think was one of my most experiences I had in China, to see speed, how speed can happen, how if it is organized, how fast something can happen. The same thing what happened during COVID, how fast they could build a COVID hotel to have the people, hospitals and hotels in those days. They had special hotels as well where you then were for your quarantine, and they built those hotels within 1 month. Yeah, I mean, I stayed in a hotel just 2 weeks ago in Yangzhou, where our owner built one of those hotels. They had to rebuild it, re-renovate it after COVID, but they finished it in 1 month. And these are those kind of things what I think in China is this amazing thing, this wow, what's happening here. Look, with these trains, where we go, traveling in China in our days and compared to the 80s. Now I travel with the fastest train from Beijing to Shanghai in 4 hours. That's about 1,900 something, nearly 1,000 kilometers. If I take a train for 750 kilometers from Berlin to Überlingen am Bodensee, it takes me 8 to 12 hours if I have no delay. So, and there's also no more flight. So I think something we missed here, and what I'm very sad about sometimes. I'm very happy that I live in a country where it's still happening, where it's booming. And that's why I'm still here, and that's why I will stay here, because it's, for me, still where the future plays.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. One of the things that really impressed me in China when I first arrived in 2012 were the many banquets and weddings I would see at hotels. You must have gotten some amazing requests there, because those are elaborate affairs. Take me back to those times. Like, what did you see?
A big wedding. You sometimes think where's all the money coming from, but a wedding is a face issue. And some people have their wedding in a restaurant. Some of them have it in a 3-star or 4-star or a 5-star or in a luxury hotel. So weddings, minimum is 200 people, can go up to 100, 800 people or 1,500 people. Yeah, that was, of course, it were great, amazing days where sometimes the longest wedding I had in my hotel was for 1 week. And lunch, 400 to 500, and dinner, 400 to 500. On a weekend, 1,000 people. So you made millions. You made 1 to 2 million euro already on this kind of business. And but you should not forget that every customer who comes to eat also brings a red pack. So as so higher, the average check per person is in the hotel, and people know when I'm going to a luxury hotel, maybe per person they're going to have to pay 100 or 200 euro. Well, that means I should also better bring a red package of 100 or 200 euro or more. Because I don't know if you have ever been to a wedding. Very often before you enter the ballroom, there is a kind like a cashier, there is a reception who is taking your envelope and who's writing your name down, and then they know already how much you brought. But that is not only in China like this. When my dad was in Indonesia, it was the same. And he was told already before how much he should better bring. Yeah, and the same thing is as well in other, I believe, Asian countries. And in our days, weddings are getting smaller. When you come back to conferences, yes, we had amazing conferences. We did caterings at the Great Wall. Yeah, amazing. It's a Great Wall. In those days, we were allowed to do it for 1,500 to 800 people. We did caterings in the Forbidden City on the platform where you could look over the Tiananmen Square, but it's not anymore allowed today. So these were historical moments. as I said before, we had the Musikantenstadel, in Beijing, and they were in the Wonghua-gung, in the cultural forbidden city, where they had their whole Musikantenstadel, and we had all these famous singers there coming and the performance. So this is all these kinds of things. When I think about it, of course, more and more will pop up in my mind. What are amazing things? What I could talk with you for hours about.
One of the things I really want to ask you is, how did the Western celebrities, you mentioned singers like Udo Jürgens, who's massively famous in Germany, how did they react when they came to China for the first time? What would they say to you?
I think they loved it, most of them, and they were very open-minded, because for many of them, it was as well the first time to come to this country, to come to a country with 1.4 billion people, with amazing culture and history, with maybe wrong thinking about the country, and then being here and seeing it with your own eyes and seeing the truth. And that is what I just can say. Come to this country and see, and then make your own judgment. And I think that is when people came here, they made their own judgment, and they saw how friendly these people can be here. If it is journalists, if it is superstars, especially if it is singers, if it is also actors. Was it Brühl who was here as well when they made the gute Deutsche, Jon Rabe, the gute Deutsche, when they made this movie of Jon Rabe, who helped many Chinese people in Nanjing to survive during the Japanese massacre. We had all this. Florian Gallenberger was the director, who was a good friend in those days, and also of me. And I think they all found out that when you are here and when you have contact, and when you are doing something to have contact, that actually you can learn a lot and you can build up great friendships. Because Chinese people, when you are giving them some time, they can be very open people, so long you are transparent and you are honest. I think, and that is what many people didn't think about. And in our days, people who are coming here and they're coming here the first time, they are just sometimes stunned. They are speechless, because they have never thought that China is so advanced. And so these actors, yes, they were stunning from China. And we could see it in the Olympics. I believe when you watch the Olympics and you watch the interviews with the sports people afterwards, they said it was one of the most organized Olympics they have ever seen.
Well, also a lot of famous filmmakers stayed here. The Last Emperor was, of course, filmed here. I believe that was Bernardo Bertolucci. Quentin Tarantino filmed parts of Kill Bill here. Steven Spielberg filmed Empire of the Sun in Shanghai.
Yes. Well, and Will Smith stayed here as well for a while. He stayed in one of the boutique hotels. I don't make advertisement now for my friend, but at Fang Saudi, at the Green Parkway Hotel. It's a very beautiful boutique hotel in there, and Will Smith stayed there with his family for 1 or 2 weeks as well. So there were already a lot of movie stars here, and I think another thing, what was one of my greatest experience in my life, when we opened we did the beginning of the construction of the movie park in Qingdao, what we built by Wanda. We invited 11 movie stars, and we flew them in by private jets. So, and that was for me the first time to be so close to Hollywood movie stars. And again, they were amazed about China. Okay, they were very short only here, 24 hours. Maximum 36 hours, and then they came in with their private jets. They lived in their bubble, and they flew out again, but they have seen a bit of it. And of course, for me on the other side, it was an experience, and we tried to show them so much as possible in this short time. And they really loved it. It was John Travolta, we had DiCaprio, we had Jet Li, we had Nicole Kidman, just a couple to say, Zeta Jones. It was the most Hollywood movie stars in the history who came here, even more than for the Beijing film festivals. Chairman Wang flew them in. He paid for them. A lot of money. How much? I can't say.
What did you do with the movie stars? What would you show them?
They came, of course, when they came here, they flew in over Beijing and then went on a stop, and then they mostly looked at the cultural sites. And then they came to Qingdao, and Qingdao was more work. That was walking on the red carpet. and then starting the construction of the thing, and then saying, well, that's going to be the Qingdao movie stars, Wanda, Qingdao movie stars for the future.
An amazing time.
Yes, it was an amazing time. That was 2013 or 14.
How do you think your life would have gone if you hadn't lived in China?
That's difficult to say. I couldn't really think about it, but I think being in a hospitality life is always exciting. Yeah, I think wherever you are, especially if you like your job, if you like hospitality, if you like to work with people, and if you like to serve the people in a way, I think in my job, if you like to do it, if you're willing to do it, and if you're doing the right thing at the right moment, it's always an exciting job, and you have a great future for your own life where you can build up on. And you will always meet different kind of people.